Hi there. In this video, what I'd like to do is dispel some of the misconceptions about the control system of cameras such as most of the Fuji X cameras. Now, there are many people who complain that the Fuji X cameras are not as intuitive because they're used to something like this. Now, as you can hopefully see here, this is your typical beginner SLR with a typical mode dial and a screen to see your settings. Pretty much the way most entry-level DSLRs work right now. And other than the fact that there are more buttons and therefore easier access without menus on the professional models, pretty much everything else is about the same. It wasn't always this way. Too many people seem to believe that this is the way cameras are and were, but they weren't. We can go back a long way. I can take about a 60-year-old Argus down off the shelf up there, and it will have a different system. A system similar to this Argus. Now, this camera dates from the 1970s. It has a light meter, but that's all. It is manual. You match a needle. In other words, you move a needle up and down. When it's centered, then you have good exposure. So how do you set that exposure? Well, first of all, now this will look familiar. You set the ISO by pulling up on this and turning it till the desired number is in place and dropping it back down again. Just like the new Fujifilm X Pro 2. To set the shutter speed, I turn this dial, which I can do with this finger quite easily. To set the aperture, I turn an aperture ring that is on the lens. After all, where is the aperture control? In the lens. Aperture, shutter speed, take the shot. Alright, that represents some pretty old technology. This actually has a screw mount lens. Screws on, screws off. Here we have one of the most popular cameras for beginners and people in photography school through much of the 70s and 80s and even into the 90s. This is a Pentax K1000. Now, different manufacturer, different system, much more modern. It's got a bayonet mount lens. However, there is no PASM dial, but there is, oh, look at this. If I want to set the ISO, I lift up on this and I turn it till the desired number is in the window and drop it. That sound familiar? Then, to change shutter speed, I turn this dial, which I can do with this finger, like so. And of course, this is my aperture ring. Well, sounds a lot like the last camera, doesn't it? As electronics became more and more prevalent in cameras and automation began to take over from basic, simple systems like I just showed you, some cameras went with the PASM dial. This, as you can tell, looks a lot like this. If you look at the top of these two cameras, you'll notice that there are similarities. Okay? However, some cameras, like this Pentax here, has a system exactly like what you see on the new Fujifilm cameras. Look at this. It had an aperture ring, but there was an A setting. If I put it on A, I now had automatic aperture. I had a shutter speed dial, but my shutter speed dial had an A setting. If I put it on A, the camera would select the shutter speed. With both of them on A, this is now program mode. If I move the shutter speed off of A, I'm now in shutter priority. I set the shutter speed, camera sets the aperture. If I put that one back on A and move the aperture ring off of the A setting, I'm now setting the aperture, it sets the shutter speed. Aperture priority. And of course, if I turn both of them off the A, I'm now in manual mode. Alright, so I've got all those modes without any PASM dial. Also, right here is my exposure compensation right here on a separate dial, different location from what you see on a modern Fuji, but same principle. So there you go, folks. Here is a system that dates back to the 90s on an electronic camera that works very much like the modern day Fuji digitals do. Now, as you can see, this system, the PASM dial system, has been around for a while. This is an old Minolta film camera. This is an old Pentax film camera. This is the first, I call it, I guess, enthusiast or consumer grade Pentax digital camera. All have the same system. So, is it a step backwards to do what Fujifilm has done? No. It's a step sideways. Some people will prefer the button pushing and wheel dial moving in this one. Some people would prefer to have actual physical controls on the camera. And some companies like Nikon, well, they came out with the DF, which unfortunately had a PASM mode dial, which of course canceled out all the other settings. So it was basically just window dressing. It made it look like an old style camera, but it didn't actually act like one. Anyhow, I hope you've enjoyed this video. I hope that you have learned something from it, and hopefully I'll have another video for you soon. Thank you.